Hello there, dear loyal listeners and new listeners. Thank you for tuning in for the second episode of the Hounds of Hübschdorf. You're aware of how much time has passed? Yes, it's exactly 1 year later now. The rumors that we have been abducted by aliens are true. The little green men wanted to get early access to the second episode, but they couldn't register. Turns out that their planet was even more bureaucratic than ours. So by the time they had arranged all the administration and brought us back, time had dashed by like a flying saucer and it was the next Halloween already. The upside is, now you've had a whole year to get comfy on your couch by the fireplace, grab a blanket and a glass of wine or a mug of tea. There will be 11 episodes in total, good for nearly 13 hours of epic audio. So 10 more episodes, including this one, which will be about an hour long and contain 3 chapters: Blind Man's Home, A Song For Graunacht, and Warnings in the Night. This version of the Hounds of Hübschdorf is the standard edition for everyone to enjoy for free. It is complete, but there is an extended edition of this story available on Bandcamp and on Patreon. That edition contains extra chapters from other characters' point of view, and it's about an hour longer. Working with these 2 editions is our way to keep our stories free, all while working on a model that will also support us financially, so we can create more of these stories within our limited amount of time between jobs, kids, and the challenges of life. Your support also adds more professionalism and quality to each new project, since it allows us to invest in new music, software and plugins. And of course, you'll get exclusive bonus content and merchandise as well. You can join our Patreon community from $1 on. That's only like buying us each a matcha latte a year, but it could make a huge difference for us, especially if lots of people support us like that. And even if you can't spare any money, we are really grateful for the likes and comments, for subscribing, for your reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and your wonderful encouragement and shares on YouTube, Podbean, and social media. And of course, we thank you so much for listening and joining us on yet another epic audio journey. The first intro is always the longest, but we won't let you wait a minute longer. It's time to not trick, but treat you to the second chapter of the Hounds of Hübschdorf on this wonderful Halloween Fantasy Friday. The Blind Man's Home. Ludlov and Tolfmann silently followed the blind man to his home, which was fairly close to the stable. Ludlov was amazed how well Garner could find his way without stumbling. The man didn't even use a cane like he had seen other blind people do. If it hadn't been for the appearance of his eyes, Ludlov probably wouldn't even have noticed his disability yet. The 3 of them walked along a muddy, unpaved street, passing houses decorated with skulls, candles, and even some mock tombstones. Here and there, a light was still shining behind a window, but the village was mostly quiet. At one point, they passed a wide house with a porch. Ludlov noticed a small boy peeking at them through the upstairs window. The little lad turned away as soon as they made eye contact. It was at this house that Garner slowed his pace, and it almost seemed like he was trying to look through the window for a while. But then he continued on, toward the northern edge of the village. The guardsman eventually took them to a tall house with a pointed rooftop. Despite its size, it lay almost hidden behind 2 other houses, half covered in moss and ivy. Behind it loomed the enormous trees of the wildwood. Garner made his way towards the entrance and opened the door with a startlingly loud creak in the quiet night. Ludlov followed his host and the initiate inside. Shadows danced around them as Tolfmann's lantern threw its light on their surroundings. The witch hunter was surprised at the size of the house. In fact, it was probably larger than his own abode in Seven Peaks. It wasn't as well maintained, though. A dozen different smells seemed to waft over them at once, some more pleasant than others. There were the scents of the wooden construction itself, mingled with herbs and spices, but there was also some mold and the subtle smell of animal presence. In the blink of an eye, a small chestnut-collared animal with a large furry tail sped out of sight across the floor. As they entered the spacious living quarters, Ludlov's attention was immediately drawn to a sizable stone hearth in the back of the room, next to a steep wooden staircase leading up. A leather-cushioned bench and some comfortable chairs were arranged in front of the fireplace, and in one of them was a fat cat. It raised its head as they came in, but lost interest right away, returning to sleep. There were some cupboards and a large dinner table, as well as an armor rack in the corner. The only decoration on the walls was a white plate depicting a tree painted in blue, and a plaque that said, "Möge die Gattin dieses Haus segnen," in beautiful gilded lettering.
Garner?
Tolfmann addressed their host carefully.
There's a squirrel on your cupboard. Oh, that's just Schnuffelnase,
Garner said.
He's old and doesn't move about too much anymore. He'll probably stay up there all through the night. He knows I've got some acorns for him in the storage room, though.
I didn't know you already had guests,
Ludlov said carefully, provoking a chuckle from Garner.
The beasties aren't guests, Master. They live here. The cat doesn't care much for the squirrel, but at least they leave each other alone. And Fenna comes by quite often. She helps me out with cooking and cleaning and that sort of thing. I think she prepared some stew for us, actually. It'll just need to be warmed up again. Shall I light the fire, then?
Tolfmann offered. There was indeed a stew pot in the fireplace, which was no longer burning, save for a few glowing embers amidst the charcoal.
Oh, it's very kind of you to offer your help. Kirbis won't like it, though. That cat hates fire.
Tolfmann took his lantern to the fireplace and picked some logs from a neatly stacked pile next to it. That signal was enough to chase the cat away immediately.
Please, have a seat,
Garner said to Ludlov as he took off his helm and ran a gloved hand over his short-cropped hair. The fire caught on surprisingly quickly. Perhaps Tolfmann had used the oil from his lantern to light it. Ludlov took place on the bench and watched as the fire began to consume the logs in the hearth. It was chilly in this large house, and the growing warmth was more than welcome. His stomach growled.
The stew will warm up quickly,
Garner said, as if he had heard the sound coming from the witch hunter's insides.
We'll soon be able to enjoy it together.
Thank you, Garner,
Ludlov said softly. Garner proceeded to set his helm down on the table and began to unbuckle his armor.
We could talk a bit while it's warming up,
Garner said, taking off his armor and hanging it on the rack. He was dressed in a simple shirt and leather jerkin, and Ludlov was surprised to notice that the young man was more muscular than he had thought.
Now, where I come from, which is here, we drink before we eat,
Garner said.
So let me take care of that first.
Ludlov relaxed in a chair as Garner disappeared through a door into what was most likely a pantry or storage room. Content with the light from the fireplace, Tolfmann extinguished his lantern and sat down on a chair next to Ludlov. The two men relaxed in silence, enjoying the warmth and the quiet for a while. The rich smell of the stew slowly began to overtake the room, taunting Ludlov's stomach.
Rather large for a single inhabitant, isn't it?
Tolfmann commented eventually.
If you exclude the pets. I inherited the place,
Garner called out from behind the door. The man seemed to have exceptional hearing as well, Ludlov concluded.
Your parents must have been rather well-to-do then,
Ludlov said in a raised voice.
My step-parents, indeed, Master. I've no memory of my real parents, actually,
Garner said as he entered into the sitting room with a bottle and some clay cups.
Always have a Waldmeister before dinner. That's how it's done in Jägersgarten. What's that? Some sort of beer?
Tolfmann asked.
It's a strong drink. A liquor, I suppose,
Garner clarified.
Based on blackberries, as it happens. I always thought that Jägersgarten was famous for it.
We'll be happy to give it a try,
Ludlov said.
but please, do continue your story. You mentioned you don't remember your real parents.
Garner nodded as he sat down and uncorked the bottle.
Apparently, we used to live in a hamlet in the woods, and they were killed by robbers when I was a toddler.
He explained, as he poured Ludlov's drink.
It seems I also had a brother who went missing when the robbers came. He was about 8 years old when that happened.
That's awful,
Tolfmann said softly.
As I said, I don't actually remember any of it.
Garner replied with a shrug.
I was 3 years old at most. Some hunters from Hübschdorf found me and took care of me, and I eventually wound up in this house, where my step-parents lived. They'd only just lost a child at the time and were happy to take me in.
Who were they?
Ludlov asked, as he accepted the cup and sniffed it. This liquor had a sweet but heady fragrance, as well as a spicy quality. The scents vaguely reminded him of dark fruit and cinnamon.
My stepfather was the captain of the guard until he died 4 years ago.
Garner told them.
I thought I could never be a guard, being blind. But let me tell you, he believed in me.
There was a wistful expression in his features.
Well, your ability to somehow perceive living things must have been a help,
Tolfmann said, before tasting his first sip of Waldmeister.
Aye, but I kept it hidden for a long time, you know. I thought maybe people would think I was a witch's child or something of that ilk. I wanted none of that.
Ludlov was enjoying his drink. It wasn't the sort of appetizer he would usually choose, but he could appreciate it nonetheless. He was still very hungry, though. Garner shrugged.
But in the end, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. Lots of folk had already noticed something didn't add up by that time anyway.
How did the villagers react?
Ludlov asked.
Well, they didn't really. Or not all that much, to be honest, Master. I'd been living here for so long and they knew me, they liked me. No one made a fuss about it, really.
Ludlov was surprised to hear that. In Seven Peaks, anyone with any sort of supernatural ability would have faced a lot of distrust and scrutiny. Perhaps the Hübschdorfers had too many real problems on their mind to worry about one man's seemingly harmless gift.
Is your father the reason why you act as a guard?
I act as a guard indeed, but they won't let me be one, even though my father taught me everything he knew. He even thought I could make captain one day, but everyone just laughed behind his back and mine. They still do. Don't think I don't know. Dressing up as a guard and following them around is all I'm allowed to do when push comes to shove. They wouldn't even let me catch the rats in the basement of the mayor's mansion.
Tolfmann raised his eyebrows.
The villagers accepted your unique form of sight, but not your ability to be a simple guardsman?
He said incredulously. Garner shrugged.
So it seems. Sometimes I think they don't really believe I can see what I can see. In any case, I think I'm looked at as something close to a village idiot, if you catch my meaning. That does bother me. Naturally. It would certainly bother me if I was in your shoes,
Tolfmann said softly. Ludlov appreciated Garner's open-heartedness. He was not a naive fool, but simply a man trying to make the best of what was given to him.
But enough about me,
Garner exclaimed.
Let's eat.
He invited his two guests over to the large dinner table and took some bowls from the cupboard where the squirrel was already enjoying a large acorn for its dinner. Then Garner went over to the fireplace to fill the bowls with vegetable stew. The stew turned out to be remarkably delicious. Ludlov had to make an effort to keep himself from gobbling it all down at once, and ended up enjoying a second and even a third helping. They were too hungry to speak much over their meal, and when they had finally finished, a contented peace came over the room. Ludlov hated to break that peace, but he had a task ahead and so many questions left. Also, he believed this would-be guard could help them get those answered. He decided to work some of the heavier questions into a lighter conversation.
2 official guards and 1 unofficial one isn't much,
he remarked.
Were there always so few?
Garner raised his head.
Oh no, Master Ludlov. There used to be quite a few more guards. As you may have noticed, Hübschdorf isn't all that large, but it isn't exactly tiny either. And the Wildwood, well, I can tell you that's a dangerous place. But then, for some reason, guards began to go missing more often. Maybe it was because they were often patrolling the edges of the forest. They'd have been easy targets for the evil that lurks there, if you see what I mean. Perhaps they were overconfident.
In what way? Tolfmann asked. Garner shifted in his seat nervously.
Well, there's a border in the woods. It's easy enough for all to see. If you go deep enough, you'll find a line of trees, all marked with red ribbons. Passing beyond that leads to trouble, let me just leave it at that. Too many of us tried.
Garner got up, feeling his way along the counter near the storage room to find a pot with a handle, which already had some water in it.
And now there's only 2 guards left and no one's in charge?
Ludlov asked. Garner shook his head.
Victor and Moritz are under direct orders of the mayor, so I suppose you could say he's in charge. But that doesn't mean a lot. The mayor doesn't actually tell them to do much. I suppose he's too busy, if you see what I mean.
He walked up to the fireplace. As soon as Tolfmann saw what he was up to, he got up to help him exchange the stew pot for the one filled with water. The initiate put the pot with the remaining stew back on the counter, while Garner produced a small cloth pouch attached to a piece of string. The pouch was probably filled with herbs, Ludlov surmised, as Garner attached it to the handle of the pot and let it dangle in the water.
Well, you're definitely more sober than those 2 are,
Tolfmann said in a mocking voice.
Since your father was captain, perhaps you could lead them from a safe distance.
Garner only smiled awkwardly and sat down by the fireplace, leaving the dirty plates on the table. The other 2 men followed his example.
Have you always been aware of this cult plaguing the town?
Ludlov asked.
There's always been trouble, yes,
Garner admitted.
But since none of you have been able or willing to cross their border, this coven or cult has been able to do whatever they liked,
Tolfmann said. Garner paused for a while, his expression turning moody. Ludlov suspected Tolfmann's words had stung.
Let me tell you, Tolfmann, the evil in those woods has been haunting us for many, many years now. Do you know what happens when someone crosses that border?
Tolfmann remained quiet, but he seemed curious.
The cultists, or whoever they are, will punish the entire village. That's how it is. If an huntsman goes too deep, he'll be taken. And then a few days later, we'll find poison in our grain supplies as well. That's why, after a while, no one dared search anymore if anyone went missing. It's a lovely place, Hübschdorf is, but it's been tormented by these punishments for years now. Houses burned down, mysterious illnesses, infestations of vermin, again and again. And now they've gone and killed all of our dogs, our famous Hübsch hounds. It's what we were known for. And now Hübschdorf is nothing more than a...
He shook his head at the tragedy of it all. He sniffed in the direction of the teapot and said,
Oh, I think the tea's ready. Would one of you be so kind as to take the 3 cups on the counter and pour us some?
Ludlov was relieved to see Tolfmann spring into action again. He hated to admit it, but he rarely succeeded at pouring hot water into a mug without either spilling water on the floor or burning himself, or both. He tried to pick up the conversation again as Tolfmann skillfully poured tea into their cups and handed one to each of them.
I've noticed you enjoy the company of animals,
Ludlov said.
Did you have a Hübsch hound?
I never had one of my own, Master, no. Hubris won't stand for it. And it would be more work for Fenna as well, I think. The stable hounds felt a bit like they belonged with the guards though, as Victor said, if you remember. Do you have any idea why they were killed?
Tolfmann asked. Garner nodded slowly.
We always know. when the summer began, there was still one more guard, you know. Roland. He had a mind to rid us of these cultists once and for all. He was young, too brave for his own good, like a Hübsch pup. He went out into the woods, crossed that border, and, well, you can guess. He never returned. And that was only the first part of the punishment. The dogs were next.
Ludlov noticed a deep sadness in Garner's young face, and more than that, a certain regret. The guard sighed deeply.
We desperately want to get our villagers back, witch hunters. But these punishments, they've sapped our courage, if I can be so bold. We live in constant distress, speculating about what terrible ordeal will come next. Some believe the disappearance of the innkeeper was the punishment for crossing the border. Others fear the real penalty is yet to come.
They enjoy your fear,
Ludlov said.
Don't give them that privilege. If you don't pursue them, your friend Roland will have died for nothing.
Garner's jaw stiffened. Ludlov suspected he had offended the man and regretted his words. He might have come across as some unknowing intruder judging the villagers to be cowards.
Those dogs were the heart of Hübschdorf, Master Ludlov. When they killed all of our dogs in one night, right after Roland had crossed their line, well, that's when people got truly scared.
I understand,
Ludlov said, sitting back in his chair, trying to take it all in. Mulling over everything he had learned so far, he decided to ask another kind of question.
From your mayor's correspondence, we got the impression he was trying to downplay the entire matter. Do you have any idea why that might be the case?
Garner's expression remained impassive, but Ludlov could somehow sense a hidden layer of frustration.
Our mayor's a proud sort, if you see my meaning. He likes to keep matters in his own hands. He tried to hide the true reason why we couldn't deliver any hoops to Seven Peaks anymore for as long as possible. He thinks we can solve all of our own problems without any help from outside. Stubborn as a stone-headed donkey he is.
He should have called upon our order sooner,
Ludlov asserted.
Is that truly so, Master?
Garner asked.
2 of your people have gone missing as well, and the mistress is in no shape to return home. I adore your order, as I'm sure you've noticed, but if truth be told, Master Ludlov, the witch hunters haven't made that much of a difference either so far. Again, not that I doubt you or anything.
Tolfmann's mouth fell open, and he seemed to be about to protest, but Ludlov held up a hand to stop him.
Surely you wouldn't rather face this evil alone?
I wouldn't, no. And I'm as thrilled as a bear in a beehive to have you around. But to be perfectly frank, most Hübschdorfers aren't too keen on any meddlesome outsiders, Master. Not even from the Witch Hunter Order, if you see what I mean. Don't these people have any idea what the Witch Hunter Order has done for this world? Without us,
Tolfmann began in barely controlled outrage. But again, Ludlov held him back.
It's all right, Tolfmann. I value Garner's honesty, and I can understand these villagers' reservations. The survival of Hübschdorf depends on a very precise set of unspoken rules drawn up by these cultists living in the woods. The slightest disturbance of this delicate balance would be disastrous. Most outsiders simply lack the awareness to deal with that thoughtfully.
As soon as he had said that, Ludlov thought about the border and suddenly felt an awful dread creeping up on him. What if Brynjar and Svensson had done exactly what these people had been trying to avoid? He could imagine the 2 witch hunters ignoring the border and paying the price for it.
Thank you for your understanding, Master Ludlov,
Garner said.
Again, I don't mean to insult your order at all, and neither do the other villagers. But the truth is that we don't know what evil lurks in these woods. And we're tired of being afraid. Especially now, when it's almost Graunacht. As you can understand, there's been some discussion on whether to celebrate it this year or not, given recent events.
Ludlov noticed that Tolfmann was still absent-mindedly blowing in his teacup to cool it off, and couldn't help but be amused by it.
I've been wondering about Graunacht,
the witch hunter said.
What is it exactly?
Garner smiled, evidently relieved to turn to a lighter subject.
Oh, Graunacht is a very popular feast day in these parts. We hold it every autumn. We decorate our houses with skeletons and bones, and children dress up as ghosts and monsters. There's an old legend about a man-eating wizard that we tell every year. And we eat lots of pumpkin pie, that's my favourite part. The whole thing is just supposed to mock the evil spirits that dwell here, and show them that we don't fear them, if you see what I mean.
But now you do fear them,
Ludlov said softly. Garner shrugged.
I'm sure that those cultists in the woods are just flesh and blood people in the end, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're in league with some evil spirits or something of that nature. To be honest, it does all sound a bit exciting in a way.
Do you have any idea how they choose their victims?
Ludlov asked. Garner seemed to take his time to process the question.
If you're thinking of some sort of pattern or anything like that, Master, then well, I don't know. It was guards mostly for a while. Occasionally a farmer would disappear, or some other younger man, like the butcher's boy, or some fellas picking berries in the woods. Now it's the innkeeper and your fellow witch hunters who've been taken. It seems like nobody's safe.
From what I hear, all the victims sound like they're males,
Tolfmann commented, surprising Ludlov with that insight.
That's unusual. Demon-worshipping cults tend to sacrifice maidens.
Garner pondered that remark.
Some ladies have gone as well, but I do have to say it's rare. They usually take men.
Ludlov made sure to remember that detail. It seemed significant somehow, although he couldn't tell why yet.
Was there something different about the abduction, when a woman was taken?
Garner frowned and fell silent for a while, holding his cup of tea in both hands.
Maybe it's a coincidence,
he said after a silent dive into his memories.
But we were able to bury one of the ladies once, since we found her body. That usually doesn't happen.
She was simply killed and left?
Ludlov asked.
Aye, she was,
Garner said.
But there were some other women who did not return.
Garner nodded. Now it was Ludlov's turn to frown. He didn't seem to be able to find any logic in this case. He cupped his chin with his hand and realized he needed a shave.
So, the innkeeper was the last one to disappear,
he asked, already knowing the answer.
Aye. But like I said, there's no real pattern to be seen as far as I can tell, besides the fact that they're usually men. Oh, and I should point out that they're getting more aggressive over time as well.
More aggressive?
Tolfmann asked, eager to contribute.
In what way?
We've always been afraid of the forest,
Garner said.
But people used to feel safe in their own homes at least. Then all the dogs were killed, and the innkeeper was taken from his own home, all within a matter of weeks, you know. Well, it won't surprise you now that people feel threatened even here in the village.
He shook his head, despair etched in his features. Ludlov sympathized with the man. Garner was young, ambitious, and he seemed capable. But the continuous terror that Hübschdorf had to endure could crush anyone's spirits.
Well, I thank you for everything you have done for Tolfmann and myself, Garner,
Ludlov said.
I'm eager to begin our investigation as quickly as possible.
I understand if you want to go looking for your missing witch hunter friends, Master,
Garner said.
But remember what I told you about those borders. They're no laughing matter, I can tell you.
The borders will have to be broken if we are to destroy this evil,
Ludlov stated.
We will act on our terms, not theirs. But before we do, we need to learn a little bit more if we can. First I'll have to talk to Mistress Weiss to learn about Brynjar and Svensson's fate. And then I'd like to investigate the inn tomorrow and ask some questions of the innkeeper's family.
I'm afraid Olver doesn't have a family anymore. His 2 sons and daughter were killed by a pack of wolves a decade ago, and his wife died a few years later from Parsilvanian pox.
Poor fellow,
Ludlov lamented.
I suppose it will take a while before they find someone to take over the inn as well. Nevertheless, since we know the enemy took over directly from his home, I think it would be best if I checked out the inn tomorrow.
Then I will take you there as soon as you've had your talk with Mistress Weiss, if she's talking already. The mayor will be pleased to meet you too, I'm sure. He did say he was looking forward to seeing more witch hunters. He did. He might just have been trying to ingratiate himself with Mistress Weiss, but he did tell us we were all to see to your every need, as long as you're staying in our village.
That is very kind of him, and you've been doing an admirable job so far.
Yes, thank you,
Tolfmann chimed in.
Ah, well, it's nothing, witch hunters. It's my pleasure to be having you over. It can get a bit lonely here, as you can imagine, even with Fenna coming by every day, and my four-legged friends around. But now I must say, it's getting rather late,
Garner concluded.
I think we can all use a rest. Wouldn't you agree?
The three men helped Garner clear the table and clean up the dirty plates and cups. More importantly, Ludlov was thrilled to be able to clean himself up after such a long and exhausting journey. As it turned out, Garner had everything he needed. He even brought them some shaving tools, which Ludlov probably needed more than Tolfmann. Eventually, their host gave the two guests clear instructions to find their separate rooms. Ludlov was more than comfortable in his lodgings. It was a modest room with a single bed, a nightstand with a burning candle, and a window commanding a view of the edge of the woods. A large stained glass oil lamp dangled from the ceiling, and there was a statuette of the maiden on a shelf, along with some other trinkets which Ludlov guessed must have belonged to Garner's step-parents, since a blind man wouldn't care for them. There was also a tinderbox, which he used to light the lamp in the faint light that shone through the window. Ludlov put his own unlit lantern on the floor. Unwilling to go to sleep just yet, he stared out of the window, watching the trees sway in the nightly wind, their leaves fluttering away like flocks of birds evading a predator. Besides the pale glare of the waxing crescent moon, the only light source outside was a single lantern near the edge of the forest, casting spooky shadows between the trees and bushes as they swayed shakily in the wind. There was an unidentifiable unease gnawing at the witch hunter's insides. Maybe he was just tired, but for a moment he thought he saw a man standing between the trees. A strange and haggard figure, with greasy hair and a grey beard, simply standing there and looking straight at him. He squinted and looked more closely, but the man was already gone. It was probably nothing, he concluded. Perhaps a curious villager, perhaps just a figment of his imagination. He was very tired, after all. When the unnerving sense of being watched eventually subsided, he turned away from the window. He extinguished the lantern and was relieved to find a clean, thick blanket on the bed, as well as a comfortable pillow. He crawled underneath the blanket and blew out the candle, suddenly immersing himself in utter darkness. It wasn't disturbing, though. Somehow, he actually felt a bit safer in the dark. Despite the troubling news and all the terrible possibilities that raced through his mind, he somehow managed to surrender to his exhaustion and fell asleep. A Song for Graunacht. Despite his fatigue, Ludlov awoke in the middle of the night. Half of his mind was already racing through his many questions about this case. The other was trying to go back to sleep. It was utterly dark and still, the soothing scent of pine wood evoking a sense of safety. It was so different from Seven Peaks and the constant background noises he would have been hearing in the nightly city. Perhaps a lonely cart in the dark, pulled by an impatiently snorting horse, a sick child crying, or the tolling of the watchman's bell. Here, it was so eerily quiet, save from the occasional cry of some nightly creature in the woods outside. A shiver went through Ludlov's spine when he realized that just beyond his window lay the wildwood, where the evildoers who plagued this village had made their lair. Thinking about the cultists out there, his mind drifted to the tales he had heard from his friend Chapelle about the demon worshippers far south in the forest of Boduag, and he wondered whether these cultists were anything like her descriptions. The question lingered but remained unanswered as his mind hopped from one half-finished thought to another. A memory came to him, unbidden but welcome, and clear as a morning dewdrop. He saw Chapelle herself, standing on the deck of a ship in the warm glow of a summer sunset. A playful breeze ruffling the stream of golden hair that emerged from beneath her tall witch-hunter hat, her eyes deep and blue as the sea, but haunted by both memory and fear. It was an image that had always stayed with him. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden creak in another room. It might have been nothing more than Garner turning in his bed. After all, the guard was likely having trouble sleeping as well. Then again, it could be one of those unwelcome visitors, looking for the next victim. Ludlov slowly let out a breath and wondered at himself. Why was he so easily disturbed in this little town? After all he had seen and done as a witch hunter, he had come to think of himself as almost fearless. But here he sensed a slow, nameless dread creeping up on him, and he distrusted it. Such emotions were after all never inspired by the goddess. He had experienced nights like this long ago, before Maria's death, when he had often stayed up late in the night, worrying whether he would be a good father. An image presented itself from somewhere deep in the recesses of his memory. He saw Maria, turning in her sleep, unconsciously resting her head against his shoulder, hidden under a mess of entangled golden hair. She had done that so often. He would look at her, smile, and eventually doze off. The memory soothed him somewhat, and he closed his eyes. He could doze off right now, perhaps, imagining her here with him. Darkness enveloped him. It was the sort of soft golden evening that only a blisteringly hot summer's day could provide. Ludlov was standing in a grassy glade somewhere deep in the woods, watching swarms of insects dance in the warm light of the sunset. He turned around and saw Maria smiling at him, her long flowing hair shining like polished gold. She was holding a child with deep brown hair and fierce blue eyes. Instinctively, Ludlov knew the little boy was their son. His heart swelled in pride and love, and he stretched his arms to grab him, to hold the child close and cuddle him. He slowly approached, but then froze, seeing his wife's expression instantly turn from love to abject terror. Maria screamed, as if she was faced with Lucas himself. Ludlov shook and cried out, opening his eyes and seeing nothing but darkness. He still heard Maria screaming. Was he still dreaming? Panicked, he fumbled about, looking for something familiar to hold on to. There were loud footsteps on the floorboards outside of his room. Then the door was thrown open and candlelight flooded in. It was Garner. When Ludlov saw the fearful expression in the man's white pupilled eyes, he knew it hadn't been Maria screaming. The whole village must have heard the horrible sound. Scrambling out of his bed, Ludlov reached for his boots and his weapons belt.
That sounded like Anna!
Garner shouted, eyes wide.
Fenna could be in danger!
Without another word, he rushed out of the room. Ludlov slid into his boots and strapped on his gear as quickly as possible. He rapidly scanned the room for his miniature crossbow, but then remembered he'd left it in Seven Peaks, to have the malfunctioning mechanism repaired. More footsteps. Now Tolfmann was standing in the doorway.
Get your weapons and lantern and follow me,
Ludlov commanded. The initiate stumbled back into the hallway to fetch his gear from his room. Below, the front door was slammed open as Garner rushed outside. Refusing to wait another moment, Ludlov dashed down the stairs and out into the night. Tolfmann would have to catch up with them. The light of the waxing moon was just bright enough to make out the shapes of the buildings and the trees, but a veil of soft mist surrounded the witch hunter, hiding anything beyond the end of the street. Ludlov sped past the eerie Graunacht decorations, following his vague impression of where the scream had come from. Then he thought he could make out Garner's silhouette blending into the mist ahead. Ludlov started to follow him, but suddenly stopped when he heard footsteps hurrying towards him. Soon, a young man with a goatee emerged out of the mist, looking haggard and sweaty. He almost pushed Ludlov aside as he hastened towards the border of the woods. Perhaps the guards were patrolling out there, and the man was going to warn them. Nevertheless, unless they had passed out drunk, Victor and Moritz must have heard the screaming too. Ludlov decided to push on in the direction he had seen Garner run. Soon after, he came upon a house with a wide open door and light shining from inside. This had to be where the screaming had come from. Suddenly, the witch hunter realized it was the same house where Garner had stood still last night. He was about to enter it, but then hesitated. Something inside of him protested. He had no idea why, but he felt a compulsion to go back and run after the man with the goatee. The look in the villager's eyes had been so haunted. What had he seen? It didn't matter. Ludlov shook off the whole idea as blind curiosity. He could always find the man later and ask him about it. Clearly, something terrifying had occurred in the house in front of him, and he was needed here. When he entered through the open door, Ludlov left it ajar behind him in case Tolfmann might come in after him. He arrived in a small wood-panelled living room, where a slender, pale young woman with tousled sandy hair was sitting at the table. She was drinking water from a cup, her hand shaking so badly that she spilled some of the contents on her nightgown. There was another woman in the room. She was slightly older and paler, which was emphasized by her long, braided raven hair. She stood in the back of the room, holding a young boy, who had apparently only just calmed down a bit. Her arms protectively embraced his chest as he rested the back of his head against her. His freckled face was narrow and sharp, and resembled that of the younger woman at the table. Of course, the boy looked deeply frightened, but there was a trace of anger in his features as well. Garner was standing next to the woman with the black braid, very close, but simultaneously careful not to touch her.
Master Witch Hunter,
the braided woman said.
Did you see him? Did they capture him for interrogation?
I didn't see anyone,
he answered.
Only a young man with a goatee. He looked like one of the villagers off to warn the guards.
He was one of the villagers,
the sandy-haired woman at the table said in a shaky voice. Ludlov recognized in her the look of someone who had just witnessed something supernaturally horrendous.
That was Johann,
the woman added.
It was my husband, or former husband, or not even that. I don't know.
She closed her eyes and bowed her head. Utterly confused, Ludlov took in the sight of the two women and the boy.
Before we continue, whose home have I invaded here?
He began.
Mine,
the dark-haired woman said.
My name is Fenna. Anna here is my sister-in-law,
she explained, glancing at the younger woman at the table.
Ever since her husband disappeared, I invited her and a boy to stay with me.
Fenna,
Ludlov said.
Garner's told me about you. Well, I'm pleased to meet all three of you. But I'm confused. Didn't I just hear that this young man with the goatee was Anna's husband?
Ludlov asked.
Well, it's strange, Master,
Fenna said.
Johann's been missing for some time, but tonight he returned. and ran off again.
Why did he run off?
Ludlov asked, trying to puzzle together the strange tale.
I think he tried to hurt her.
Fenna stroked the restless boy's hair. Ludlov could see his chest moving with each angry breath. Then he thought about the man he had crossed. He had looked quite ordinary and afraid. The witch hunter would never have taken him for a threat, but apparently this Johann had tried to hurt his wife. Having gathered her courage, Anna spoke up again.
I was convinced he had returned. For a moment I thought... I really believed we were going to be a whole family again.
Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away and recomposed herself.
Only it wasn't him. Or at least, I don't think so.
Ludlov remained silent, awaiting her further explanation.
My son told me to run from him.
She continued eventually, tears suddenly escaping from her eyes.
Said he was evil. That's when I knew, inside. I screamed. I had to get away from him.
Ludlov slowly sat down at the table, allowing the story to sink in. He should have gone after that man, he thought. He should have listened to his instincts. He drummed his fingers on the tabletop in frustration. Just then, Tolfmann arrived, pushing himself through the doorway with all the balance and grace of a drunk. He glanced momentarily at everyone else in the room and then dropped into an empty chair next to his master. Ludlov paid him no heed and instead turned to the young boy.
What's your name, young man?
He asked gently.
Florian,
The boy said in a small, shy voice.
I think you did something brave just now, Florian. I think you saved your mum.
The boy squirmed in discomfort at first, but then he nodded.
Florian,
Ludlov began again.
can I ask you how you knew that this man wasn't your father?
The boy hesitated. He seemed distrustful of the witch hunter. Ludlov couldn't blame him after what he had just experienced.
It's all right, Florian.
Fenna said.
Master Ludlov has come from the big city to catch the bad men. He wants to help.
Little Florian seemed to take his aunt's words to heart.
I don't know.
He told Ludlov.
That wasn't my dad. He was evil. I saw.
Can you describe what you saw, lad?
Ludlov asked in a soft, patient voice.
It was a sort of shimmer. It felt bad.
The boy said, then shrugged and looked away. He didn't seem willing to speak up again.
He was right.
Anna said.
I felt it as soon as Florian said it. That man, if it was even a man, it looked like Johann. It even smelled like him. But it just wasn't. It wore his clothing. It talked like him, smiled like him, and it even called me what he always used to call me.
What's that?
Ludlov asked in an investigative tone, but really more out of curiosity.
Sternknopfchen,
she answered. At first, the pet name struck Ludlov as odd, but then he remembered how he used to call his own wife Kleberhaupe, after a sticky caterpillar.
Johann called me that because of the day when we first kissed.
Anna explained.
There's a beautiful kind of tree that can be found a lot in these parts. One is growing in the center of the village. It's got bright yellow blossoms in springtime that are called Sternknopfkens. I was wearing those blossoms in my hair that day.
Did you also see this shimmer?
Ludlov asked. Anna shook her head.
He just... When he kissed me, he felt different. It felt different.
When she fell quiet for a brief moment, Ludlov noticed how no one else in the room made a sound either. Eventually, she sighed and shrugged.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything more. I know it's not proof or anything, but to me it was.
It's quite all right,
said Ludlov, reaching out across the table to grasp her hand. He searched her eyes.
I believe you. My wife used to say, a man's kiss is the signature of his soul.
Anna looked up and smiled at him through her tears. Suddenly, Ludlov became intensely aware of Tolfmann's eyes on him after what he had said, and felt an awkward sense of shame rising up. He wanted to bark an order at the young man, but couldn't think of anything.
There was something else, Master Ludlov.
Anna said.
Tell me.
Anna glanced at Florian, then turned to the witch hunter again.
Johann adored his son. He was always great with the boy. When Florian was just a baby, he was the only one who could comfort him when he was crying. He had this routine where he put the lad on his knee and used to sing his song about a rocking boat where he gently patted him on his behind. I was never able to do it like Johann. Florian always stopped crying at once whenever he did that.
Ludlov wondered how this story could possibly be relevant, but he listened patiently.
When this Johann saw Florian just now, there was this look on his face. He was looking straight at Florian with disgust. He looked disgusted with his own son. That's how I knew Florian was right. Whatever that thing out there is not my husband. Or no longer.
Has anything like this happened before in Hübschdorf?
Ludlov asked eventually.
Well, in a manner of speaking.
Fenna said hesitantly.
Tell me, Fenna,
Ludlov said.
Well, there haven't a few times when I thought I saw my Rudiger here. Just walking through the village, but I always thought it had to be my imagination.
Interesting. Was this long ago?
It happened a few times this past summer.
Fenna said.
They say things like that happen when you're deep in grief, but I don't know. I thought I was past that by then.
Ludlov turned to Garner.
Garner, did you happen to notice the man outside with the goatee?
The witch hunter realized he had barely managed to avoid the verb see. It was so easy to forget that Garner was actually blind. In some ways, the man seemed more observant than he was.
No,
said Garner sadly.
it's strange it is. I must have passed him on my way here, come to think of it, but then again, I didn't see a single living soul.
So that's how Garner thought of his ability, Ludlov quietly noted. He saw life. He would remember that.
And believe me, Garner would have noticed him and recognized him.
Fenna said in a stern voice, almost as if she were already defending the would-be guard against a skeptical attitude Ludlov didn't actually hold.
This proves Florian was right. That man or thing wasn't Johann. It might not even have been alive.
She sounded as if she were an experienced witch hunter who knew everything about supernatural creatures. It was mildly amusing to Ludlov.
Well,
Garner said softly,
if it was some sort of illusion, I suppose that would explain why I wasn't aware of crossing him on my way over here.
Ludlov pondered it all.
The man you met, how closely did he resemble Johann?
Ludlov asked Anna.
Is there any chance it might have been someone disguised as your husband?
Anna shook her head emphatically.
It was him in every detail. Not even his twin. It was Johann. Down to the tiniest scar. But then, it wasn't.
Did he say anything specific?
He said he had escaped from some evil in the woods.
Anna said. Florian was staring at the wall. The boy looked in shock. Absent-mindedly, he started singing a song.
1, 2, 3. He sneaks behind a tree. 4, 5, 6. He hides behind the bricks. 7, 8, 9. He'll rip out your spine. And finally 10. He will return again. You're the one to blame. You're the one to blame. You're the one to blame if you don't play his game.
Anna looked at Ludlov and Tolfmann in embarrassment, as if she was about to apologize for her son's unsettling song, but Ludlov ignored her, instead staring at the boy intently. He felt shivers down his spine as he was reminded of the song of the bog witch. He became deeply aware of a strong conviction that often came to him whenever he was first exposed to some old fairy tale or legend. The knowledge that there was always a kernel of history hidden within, perhaps small but never insignificant.
Where did you learn this song, lad?
Ludlov asked.
Granny taught me when I was smaller. She's dead now.
Pay no heed, Master Witch Hunter. It's just a Graunacht song.
Fenna reassured him.
One of the many frightening ditties that children love to sing during this time of year. Legend tells of an evil wizard called Grauwald. Why children actually enjoy that sort of thing, I'll never understand, but they do.
Ludlov frowned. He needed to be alone with his thoughts. Turning to Tolfmann, Ludlov only now realized how drowsy the young man looked.
Can you guard these women and young man with your life?
He asked Tolfmann. When the initiate replied with a curt nod, Ludlov said,
I will return to the tower with Garner and go look for a sign of this thing that isn't Anna's husband.
Here, take my lantern, Master Ludlov, Tolfmann said. It's dark out there. Ludlov accepted it gratefully. Garner raised his back and walked across the room to Ludlov's side as the witch hunter stood up and slid his chair under the table.
Ladies, young man, thank you for your assistance,
Ludlov said, addressing the inhabitants of the house. Then he turned to the initiate.
Tolfmann, make certain this young man still gets some proper rest,
he said, pointing at young Florian. Then, without further delay, he vanished back into the dark night air, Garner close behind. Warnings in the night. Ludlov and Garner approached the guard tower. The torches on its side were extinguished and all was quiet, save for the occasional hooting of an owl in the woods. As he held up Tolfmann's lantern, the witch hunter could see how a thin blue-grey smoke emanated out of the doorway. That was concerning. Holding the lantern aloft, he entered the tower. Immediately, a pungent, acrid smell assaulted his nostrils as the yellowish light revealed Moritz and Victor on the ground. Fear and sorrow tugged at the witch hunter's insides as he beheld the young men. He had only just met them. He sighed and shook his head. Then a wave of relief washed over him as Moritz started snoring loudly. Ludlov rolled his eyes. He was about to give in to the temptation to kick the closest of the fallen guards in his ribs with the hardest part of his boot, but then the witch hunter noticed the two black pouches on the ground, from which the foul-smelling bluish smoke originated.
Watch out, Master Ludlov!
Garner called out from outside.
Something dangerous is causing that smell, let me tell you. Try not to breathe it in.
Ludlov was taken aback by Garner's tone, unaccustomed to receiving orders from a villager, but he could tell the young man knew what he was talking about.
Well, that's why I want to get rid of these things,
the witch hunter replied, covering his nose and mouth with a gloved hand. Careful to keep the pouches away from fire, he set down his lantern on the table. Then he gingerly approached the smoking pouches and picked them up. Garner kept a safe distance from the suspicious things, as Ludlov came speeding out of the tower towards the border of the forest to dispose of them, quickly covering up the foul things with some moist autumn leaves using the side of his boot, until there was no more smoke rising up from them. When he returned to the guard tower, Garner had already dragged Victor out of the tower and was kneeling beside him, feeling his pulse.
He seems to be sound asleep,
he said.
Stay with him,
Ludlov said.
I'll get Moritz too.
Garner didn't respond, but obeyed, as Ludlov entered the tower to drag the second guard out. Moritz was lighter than Victor, but not by much.
Is he all right as well, Master Ludlov?
Garner asked as the witch hunter dropped the unconscious guard on the ground. A loud snore from Moritz told them enough.
May I ask, where did you put those pouches?
Garner wanted to know.
About 10 paces to the north, Ludlov said. You'll smell it, I'm sure.
Garner ran off, and when he came back, he was carrying what Ludlov assumed to be one of the pouches wrapped in a handkerchief. The smoking had stopped entirely, at least. The young man held it up in front of his face, careful not to keep it too close, and breathed in the air. Macassiflora, Vervain, Dowsley, Verbaclassic and poppies, Valerian root, purple cherry, Goldorian lavender, tameless chamomile, and several ups. Well, whoever made this beauty knew his herbs, no mistake. There was enough here to take him out for hours, Garner concluded. Ludlov raised his eyebrows.
You were able to detect all of those ingredients just by carefully sniffing that pouch.
Garner shrugged.
I suppose since I can't see, I learned to smell better than most, Master. And I've always had a knack for plant lore, if it's not too bold to say so.
Ludlov was impressed, but kept it to himself.
Victor's beginning to come to, I think,
Garner said. Moritz was still snoring, but the older guard slowly sat up, clutching his head.
What happened?
He asked in a hoarse, mourning voice.
That's what we're here to piece together,
Garner said.
Is there anything you remember?
Ludlov asked.
Someone threw something through the doorway. Some horrid, stinking, smoking thing, Victor said, disgust written in his face. I looked out and saw someone running towards the stables. And then nothing. Black. I had a dream. There was blood in it. That's all I can remember.
The stables. I want to have a look over there,
Ludlov concluded.
Will you two be all right?
He asked Victor.
Yes, Master.
Victor groaned, looking like he could throw up at any moment.
Come, Garner,
Ludlov said, as he entered the tower and took his lantern back from the table inside. As he approached the stable, a pervasive scent emerged, which reminded him of a butchery. His stomach twisted when he entered, and the light of the lantern immediately revealed splotches of bright red blood on the hay-strewn ground. He slowly approached the horses, dreading what he would find. First shock, and then relief broke over him when Bruno snorted hard as soon as he saw Ludlov. The witch hunter couldn't help but smile at his steed. The animal was clearly surprised to see his rider at this hour of the night. The horse's gentle brown eyes were fixed upon Ludlov, as if he had stories to tell his master. Much to the witch hunter's relief, he also saw Bree in the stall next to Bruno's, shaking her manes and looking rather disinterested. Garner entered and walked right up to the stall where Stem had been stabled, but the head of Brynjar's horse didn't appear above the wooden stall door.
I can't see him,
Garner said in a sad voice. Ludlov immediately knew what that meant. He approached with his lantern and opened the door. The animal, or what was left of it, was lying on the ground. Its rib cage cracked open, revealing a wide gaping hole from which its intestines lay spilled out like ropes on the deck of a ship. The stall was entirely drenched in blood. Ludlov bowed his head.
Thank you for listening to the second episode of the Hounds of Hübschdorf, a witch hunter tale. We hope you enjoyed it and that you're fully immersed again in our setting. This audiobook was made possible with the support of our loyal patrons, including Amy Austin, Dustin Garner, Antonio Padula, Peter Strandkrone, Cody H, Jogoth Oer, Matt Patain, Cameron Brantley, Tony Ranico, Liam Gabriel, Mix and Match, Caitlin Bourgeois, Kadir Hussein, Yizi Dusht, Gander, Osarion, Alu, Arno Teva, Ryan Stock, Jay, Rob Skinner, Tim the Gothic Horror Guy, Johnny White, Sue Morgan. If you enjoyed this episode and you're on YouTube, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to get notified of the next episodes and future projects. Therefore, it's important that you also click the notification bell. And of course, we always appreciate your comments under the video. If you're on Podbean, we appreciate it if you like and share this episode with your friends and tune in for our next episode. The next chapter is called Blood and Bones and will be premiering next week. If you can't wait that long, you can purchase the extended edition of the entire story on Bandcamp or join us on Patreon in the Master Witch Hunter tier or higher. Or you can support us in other tiers from as little as $1 a month. That would be a mere $12 a year. It would mean the world to us, or at least a nice piece of Halloween decoration, which is pretty awesome too. Thank you for listening to the Hounds of Hübschdorf, and we hope you'll return next week for episode 3. By the way, if you're looking for something to pass the time between episodes, I met someone online who created a search engine for audiobooks. It's currently in the demo stage, but it looks very promising. The URL is booksearch.party. Feel free to check it out and see you next week.